going to talk to you today about how to write a ghost story. Now, for this, you'll need paper, notebook, pen or pencil. So, firstly, do you believe in ghosts? Unless you know otherwise, your story is fictional, or is going to be fictional. But many people do believe in ghosts, and sometimes they can be a comforting presence for some people. But fear is very personal. Different people have different fears, and ghosts are pretty common as far as stories are concerned, whether you believe in them or you don't. So if you can write a good, believable ghost story, I think really you could pretty much write anything. So first of all, what I would advise you to think about is what scares you. Not everyone has the same fears. Mainly we fear the things that we don't know. So what really makes the hair stand up on the neck of your reader? What is it about ghosts that actually scares us? When you think of a ghost, what do you think they look like? Do you think they look like the stickers on my window? If you can see skeletons, sheets with black holes for eyes. And would a human-looking skeleton actually be more frightening than a pale, shapeless mass, or even a skeleton? So, which of those images do you think would frighten you most? Now, I'm going to be honest, I do have a lot of information here, so from time to time I will be looking at my own notes simply because I don't want to forget anything. So, right, you're going to write a story about a ghost. How often would you like your skeleton to appear? Once a year, on an anniversary? On the anniversary of their death, perhaps? Or when the moon, monthly when the moon is full? Or what about every night? Or is it only when there are people in the location that they can scare? That's a point for you to think about when you're writing a ghost story. Okay, so the next step is, why are they haunting your location? Is it because they just got stuck in this world? Is it because they can't find peace? Is it because they feel that they still have something to do? So that's another few things for you to think about. So next thing is, where might you meet a ghost? Write down what it is. Think about a location and then write down what it is about that place that frightens you. Then it's going to be a lot easier to complete the rest of your story. Once you have the answer to that, you're well on the way. So, another question that I wanted to ask you to think about, something I want you to think about. Are ghosts only from the past? Could they be from the future? Could there be some kind of time slip? Or could there be another dimension somewhere that's running alongside the world that we know now? And somehow there's a blip and it's not really a ghost that you're seeing. It's somebody from a different dimension that's running alongside our own. So that gives you a few varieties of elements to put in your story. Okay, so the next thing, and again, as I say, I am going to look at my notes because there is a lot here. What should you avoid when you're writing a ghost story? How about clanking, jangling chains? Would that not be a bit laughable? How about distressed wailing? In the middle of the night. Well, shouldn't be night. Things that go bump in the night. It's not really scary, are they? Not really. Okay, and they have been overused. So those are the kind of things that you need to perhaps avoid in your story. And writing lines into your story such as "it was a dark and gloomy night." No. A ghost appearing as white as a sheet, or carrying his decapitated head under his arm. Those sort of storylines are actually likely to lose tension for your reader. So, ghost, spectre, phantom, if you can, being unsure what your reader, or what your main character rather, is facing. Again, it's the unknown, but the fact that you don't know exactly what it is that your character is going to face, that actually sort of adds to the tension of the story. You can figure that out as you go along. You don't have to know that right from the start. So, unease. Your character being uneasy makes your reader uneasy, and it's much more scary. So you want your setting to be atmospheric. So think very, very carefully about your setting. Now, you want something creepy, presumably. So creepy, what would we have? Well, a cemetery for one, an empty, darkened theatre, perhaps, with noises going on, but nobody around. Or what about an abandoned hospital? Think of all the things that might have happened in a hospital. A remote country house, an old castle, perfect. How about a lonely moor at night? Or perhaps a wrecked pirate ship. So you've got all these different options, places that you can use that everybody would think, oh, that's a bit scary. How would I feel if I was there? Okay. Now, the other thing is, your main character or characters, they need to be cut off from help. They need to be somewhere where they're isolated. No one can help them. So think about why they're there. Think about how they got cut off from anyone else who could help them. And think about the fact that most people are frightened of the unknown. So then, okay, little question for you here. What comes after death? Your character, your ghost, phantom, spectre, is someone or something who's already passed on. How? Why? Think about those bits that go on with the death of that character, that creature. Okay. Is there a noise in another room, but there's nobody in there? So where's that noise coming from and who's making it? And I'm going to say this, is there something lurking in the darkness? That's for you to figure out. Okay, so senses. You are going to pick up a lot of feeling through your senses. Sound, smell, touch, finally sight. And maybe even if sometimes when you take in a smell, because your nose and your mouth are so close, maybe you could actually taste that smell. Does that sound silly? It's possible. Maybe you hear a strange sound, breathing, but there's nobody there. Eerie laughter. How about a child's laughter? Now, from an attic or a cellar, and there's no children in the house, So is it really a child? Could it be a poltergeist? A poltergeist is another type of ghost, but it causes lots of mayhem. And poltergeists are very good at working around children. So that's another thing. Okay, now let's look at the sense of smell. If there's something old and dying or dead, you'd have a stale, mouldy smell. You might even smell blood. It's a bit gruesome, really, isn't it, when you think about it? So, as I just said, can that smell filter through to our mouths? You're not actually tasting it, you're getting a sense of the taste. Touch. You're on your own. You're in a room or a corridor, a library, something like that. And you feel a touch on your shoulder. You turn very quickly, nothing there. So who touched you? What touched you? It's been a sudden lowering of temperature in the room. You're suddenly very cold, and there's no explanation. So there's a sense of something or someone that's going to give your character goosebumps. But is there something in the shadows as well? Is there something that you can't see? You just know it's there. So your character is now anxious, nervous, maybe even more, absolutely terrified. So how does that come out? How does that show on your character? Are they trembling? Are they sweating? Do they feel sick? Their pulse rate is racing. Is the hair standing up on the back of their neck? And can you think of anything else that might describe how your character's feeling? Maybe feet absolutely rooted to the floor, can't move. Maybe, on the other hand, they just run like mad. So you have various options. Now, going on to your main character or characters, the way to start a ghost story is to give people generally a normal life. They're going to school, they're going to college, they're going to work. They have a family, they have a home. Things are quite normal. But then there'll be a trigger. Something will happen that will lead them to this world of mystery. You have to give them some kind of trigger. Maybe they have a dog. They're out for a walk with the dog. And the dog suddenly stares at something, or lays down and howls, or suddenly runs off. Now, the dog's scared, and dogs are usually a lot more sensitive than we are. So what is it? What is it that's frightened that dog? And then you've got to try and find the dog, haven't you? But this is just one possibility, just one thing that could lead you into the next part of your story. So imagine maybe, on the other hand, a group of friends, and one of them comes across some kind of sign or signal, some clue in a book about something strange somewhere nearby. and they want to go and find out what it is. So you've given them something to do. You've given them a quest. They can go on their own or they can go with friends. All this is entirely up to you because it's going to be your story. So, somewhere along, not too far from the beginning, you need to give them a shock. Something that really frightens them suddenly. It's something that happens to them while they're on their way to try and figure out what's at the end of the quest that you've just given them. But the other thing is as well, that even with all this going on, all these things that are happening to your characters or character, something makes them carry on, and that something is they make a choice, they make a decision to continue with that quest, which shows strength of character. So think about that as well, that they're brave, maybe a little bit foolish, and maybe really, really scared, but they're determined to find the answers. So, okay, then you want to structure your story. Some of the best ghost stories, you never actually see the ghost, phantom, whatever you want to call it. It just seems to make it spooky when you don't actually see what it is that's scaring everybody. But it also makes your reader's imagination work a bit harder. They have to try and visualize something that even your character can't see. So you can make this really, really spooky. When you think about people that you know, what is it that frightens them? There are certain things that lots of people are frightened of. Dolls. Children play with dolls all the time, but there's something sometimes about some dolls that really do just, oh, I don't like that. My mother had a Chinese mandarin doll, and he had extraordinarily long fingers and very long legs, beautifully embroidered outfit, and a sort of cardboard or paper type, very ornate hat. Well, I was used to having him around. I was used to seeing him on this little chair that Mum kept him on. But other children coming into the house, they absolutely hated him, terrified of him. And he'd never done anything. He just sat there. But it was something about that doll that spooked a lot of children. How about clowns? Now, is it because a clown has you can't see their face properly because of the makeup? So it's a kind of mask that they wear. Is it that frightens people about clowns? What do you think? Ventriloquists and their dummies. So what's frightening about that? Now, is it that the dummy looks peculiar because it is just another doll that it can open its mouth? Is it that the ventriloquist is transferring his voice and his thoughts into that dummy? I don't really know, but I do know that it does scare people. But I also know that dolls and ventriloquist dummies have been used in horror films. So maybe that's the connection. clowns have been in horror films as well. So is that the connection? Is it because people have had those images put in front of them on film? Is that what then frightens them, or is it the other way around? So you just give that some thought, and it's for you to decide what you think. It's not for me to tell you. I'm giving you hints and tips on writing ghost stories and things that you might want to think about. But it's going to be your story, as I said before. So you're the one who has to make up your mind how it's going to go and what's going to be frightening for your characters. So, although I've said start your story with your character having a normal life, there is another way. And it's up to you if you want to use this way. How about starting the story with something spooky happening? And then things sort of settling down for a while and then creeping back up again. You can do that. You could have a sharp shock at the beginning of your story. That'll grab your reader's attention, certainly. So when you think about it, okay, how many of you have grown up watching Scooby-Doo? So if you start with something spooky, you're going to have to make sure that what happens later is a lot worse than what you had at the beginning. I mean, with Scooby-Doo, for instance, people go missing. If that happens in your story, try to make each incident worse than the one before. Think of that. Okay. So it's your choice as well. Does your main character, or the last one in the group, if it is a group, sorry, do they survive? That's your choice. If they do, and you've put them through a terrible time, how have they changed by the end of it? And if they don't survive, if you choose for that they don't survive, how are you going to end it? What happens to the ghost? Is the ghost still there? Is it just waiting for the next people to come along? So there's another something for you to think about. So you have, let's say you've got a group of friends and they're all going somewhere, maybe even it's a haunted house weekend. None of them really believe that it's haunted. Or you might have one or two that are a little bit sort of, well, I'm not sure, I don't really want to be here, but the rest of them are going. So I can't really back out. So what happens to them one by one? You've got different personalities. You've got people who are funny, you've got people who are brave, you've got people who are clever. You've got people who, as they don't really want to be part of it and very shy, would much rather not be there. Okay, but bring out those characteristics in your characters. Think about if you've got 3, 4, 5, they're all different people. They've all got different personalities, different characteristics, and they all need to be shown. One of them will be the leader, a natural leader. Is that one going to survive? Your choice again. Okay. But by bringing out the personalities, the characteristics of your cast of 3, 4, 5, you'll make your story more believable. Now, one of the things that I always suggest to anybody writing, I've run workshops for children, I've run workshops for adults. I would always suggest that you write in either the first or the third person. Now, if you're not quite sure what that means, the first person is your main character. You are writing the story through that person's eyes. So they're seeing it, they're part of it. The third person is somebody else who is relating that story. You don't even have to give that person a name. When authors write a book, when they're writing stories, they don't say, I'm writing this as so-and-so. They just start writing the story. They are the third person. So try not to go off your storyline as well. If say, you've got a couple of people talking and one of them starts talking about things that they've done in the past and so on, that doesn't actually relate to, unless there is something in there that will relate to the story that you're writing, and that's fine. But if there isn't, then forget that. It's not necessary. It's extra. If you're writing a story like this, generally it's going to be a short story and you can't afford to go off at different angles. You need to stick with your main story. Okay. That is if you want your reader to stay gripped. So I'm going on to my next page now. When something happens, talk about it in your story and give a good reason for it happening, but don't go into masses and masses of detail. All you need is enough detail for your reader to figure out for themselves what's happening. And don't write lists as in, she was wearing this, 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 and this. This is, we have something that we call show, not tell in books. And it's a way of describing something. Now, you want your reader to feel the same emotion as your main character in your story. And the main rule with this is through the show, not tell. So I'll give you an example. I was scared as footsteps approached my bed, but I refused to look. Now that is tell. Okay, but show is, I moved further under the duvet. I was scared to breathe. My pulse raced. It was coming nearer. I pulled the duvet over my head and prayed whatever it was would go away. If I didn't look, it would be all right. It called my name. It wanted me to look. But no, I wouldn't. See the difference between the two styles there? So now I want you to think about the ghosts themselves. You could tell your story from the ghost point of view. Could you feel some pity for your ghost? Do you know who they were? Do you know what happened to them? Do you know why they're haunting and scaring people? How about just taking taking a bit of time to actually just think about how the ghost became a ghost and why. So, are they haunted? Have they been haunting people to death? Are they miserable? Are they waiting, perhaps, for someone to die to join them? Someone in particular? Are they vengeful? Do they want to take revenge for something that happened to them? Are they actually looking for someone that will give them eternal peace? I'll mention a story, a particular story, a bit later on to do with that. And at the end of your story, your character obviously isn't going to be the only one left. There's the ghost as well. Unless you manage to help them find their way. What about escaping? You've got to think about how your character or characters escape from the difficulty that they're in, from the setting that they're in, from the ghost. How are you going to get them away? And when you do, is there anything else going to get them? Is something, when you think everything's going to be all right, does something unexpected happen? Again, that's your choice. I'm just giving you some ideas, perhaps. So, okay, so you're looking for a way out. Let's hope nothing dreadful happens. So the ending of your story, and this is what your story was building up to, it's the most gripping part of the story. Your character makes a decision. Your character carries out an action. Remember, for every action, there is a reaction. It's motivation. Why are they there in the first place? You've already explained that in your story, why they got there. You can make it just that they're curious, if you want. They found out about, oh, this place is haunted, let's go and check it out. So just out of curiosity. And is that curiosity going to cause them something unpleasant, going to make something awful happen to them? Interesting. It's a nice way to think about what can happen to people out of curiosity. So, whatever happens, whichever way you go, you have to remember it's your story, you're leading it, so it's your decision. So, right, outcome. Your character, hopefully, all being well, will return to normal life. But are they changed by what they've been through? What's it going to do to their personality? What have they learned? What have they lost? If some of the main characters, if you have characters, a group of them again, have friendships been lost? Have lives been lost? It's not a lot you could do with a ghost story, So, as I mentioned before, or as a question, I'll put it as a question this time, who believes in ghosts? Most people don't really think they're real. There's nothing hiding in the dark. But they do love to read about ghosts and scary things. People love horror films. Personally, I don't. I'm not a great one for horror films. And I actually have a friend who's a horror writer, and she won't watch horror films because her imagination, what goes on in her head with the things that she's written about is one thing. But her imagination just takes over and she just finds horror films too frightening. Funny that, isn't it? How it can affect you. So, but the fact that people want to be frightened is good for a horror writer or a ghost writer. Sorry, a writer of ghost stories, not a ghost writer. That's something else. A ghost writer is somebody who writes stories for other people. Somebody for people who can't actually write themselves but do have the ideas. That's what ghost writers are. So, right, remember, within your story, some things have to be perfectly normal because that highlights the change. That highlights how things change. The enormity of what's happening to your character or characters, taking them out of their normal life into something maybe terrifying. So they have to have their routines, their day-to-day routines, until something happens and they find them in this very strange, bizarre, frightening situation. Right. So my additional tips here are, one, at the end of your story, don't drag it out. Okay, don't make it too long. Whatever the ending, and whoever dies, whoever survives, just get on with it, basically. Just write it out and leave it like that. Now, leave some questions unanswered. Try and think of a way of not dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. You want your reader to be left feeling with that, having that feeling of unease afterwards, after they finish your story. That way, they'll remember it. And it would be quite nice to have a little twist, maybe, at the end of your story. So try and find maybe what they call a haunting last line. An example of this would be something like, whenever this memory lived in him, he felt alive. But the feeling was painful, too deep, too sharp, even after so many years. Another, although he knew he could never rejoin the living world, there were still distant memories or traces of memory of being amongst people who were pleased to see him, and how he wanted to open that door just one last time. That's from the ghost point of view. He wanted to be able to go back to the living world, but he knew he couldn't. How about that? That sort of leaves you on a bit of a sad note, doesn't it? So try to leave your reader with a feeling of maybe a little bit of nervousness about walking down a dark corridor, or going through a door that they don't particularly want to know what's on the other side. They'd like to know that your ghost has been laid to rest, or has it? So Oh, just a few other things here. Try not to use the following words: scared, scary, afraid, frightened, horror, horrified, terror, terrified. These are all words that have been used over and over again. And if you can try and think of other words that would conjure up the same kind of feelings, we're doing okay. Definitely doing okay. One of the things I would suggest as well is, before you start thinking about writing a ghost story, it would be good for you to see how other authors have done it, to help you learn how to build up tension. Now, what you mustn't do is to copy what they've done. You could mention, for instance, let's say the amazing Mr. Blunden, for instance. You can mention the book, or you can mention, you can recite a piece in it, but you must acknowledge that that's where it's come from, because otherwise it's called plagiarism and you're actually copying somebody else's work, and you must not do that. So if you do any research on any subject and any type of writing genre, if you're quoting somebody else's work, always make sure that you acknowledge it in your story, even if it's just a piece at the end of the story. But there are some suitable ghost stories that you could read that would be very good to help you learn how to build tension. For instance, Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book, or The Canterville Ghost, and as I mentioned, The Amazing Mr. Blunden. Roald Dahl wrote some ghost stories as well. He's got a book of ghost stories. And then there's another book, 13 Haunting Tales to Tell. It's a scary book for children, and generally it's aimed at 9 to 12-year-olds. Now, those are the kind of books that if you do want to write ghost stories, those are the sort of books that you should be reading. It always pays to read books about whichever genre it is that you want to write in. Now, my name is Julie Malone. I'm an author. I write under the name of J Malone, which is J-A-E Malone, M-A-L-O-N-E. And as I said before, I've run workshops and that sort of thing, and I do have handouts that I can always email out to people if they're interested in hints and tips of writing games and that sort of thing. And if you're interested in anything like that, you can contact me through Facebook, J Malone page, or J Malone, that's JAEMALONE .author@gmail.com. And I'd be only too happy to send you any information that you might think would help you with your writing. And it's not just with ghost stories. It can be fantasy, it can be crime, it can be whatever it is that you want to write. So yeah, I think I've probably just about come to the end of my my session with you today. So thank you, and I hope I've been helpful.